If you're a college student looking for a job, one of the very first steps you need to think about is networking early. AJ, tell us why that's so important.
Before I even dive into this point, I want everybody listening and watching to imagine themselves it's senior year. And I want you to ask yourself, where do you want to be in the job search process? Do you want to have an amazing 3.5 years? It's super fun, super exciting. And then you're scrambling for a job, even post graduation. There's a lot of pressure, maybe from your family, from your friends, colleagues, etc. Or do you want to start early? And the earlier you start, the less transactional it is. And if you start early, you're going to be that person that's so ahead of the game. And what I've learned in my career is that the person who starts the early usually wins. And this quote was actually said from one of my favorite recruiters on the Final Round podcast that we interviewed, Bruce Mullen, who was a recruiter from Boston Consulting Group. And he literally said that the biggest mistake candidates make is they network a week before the application deadline when they need something. I need a referral. I need you to intro me to somebody. I need something from you. So I want you to ask yourself, can you start today? I don't care if you're a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, even the start of senior year. The earlier you network, the easier it's going to be, the more organic it's going to be, and the better results you're going to derive.
Yeah, I feel like most people think I need a job, I better start networking. Where the best networking happens when you don't actually need a job, and you can actually build that foundation network to work for you when the job search is happening.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. And I think that networking is such a buzzword, especially these days. Everyone says network, network, network. But the best thing that you can do is start practicing and talking to people and putting yourself out there. And once you start early, you can get kind of those hiccups ironed out. So when you are recruiting with those big recruiters and you're networking with those hiring managers, you're going to be ready to go versus if your first time that you're networking with someone is a huge career event and you don't know how to talk about yourself and your experiences, it's not going to go well for you.
Yeah, a follow-up for you, AJ. Besides adding LinkedIn connections and trying to engage on LinkedIn, what would be another way a new student could network?
I would say involvement is such a good way to network. And of course, you can network, if you're in line at Starbucks on campus or, maybe in the library or maybe in class, but involvement, I believe, trumps GPA. And I actually was a transfer student. I came from community college and transferred to the University of Southern California, the Marshall School of Business. And I remember that I was so focused on my GPA, but I soon realized that it's just a decimal, right? It's just one or two numbers. And of course, it's important. I'm not saying you should tank your GPA, but there's only so much that you can do to improve it. And once you do all that you can, start putting some time, effort, and resources into getting involved. And not only will it help build your story, especially as students don't have a ton of experience, but if you're pursuing investment banking and you're part of an investment banking club or organization, that is classified as experience. Of course, it's not an internship, but it's still great experience. I would say the second thing also, especially when I was a transfer student, it's hard to meet people. So unless you're going to join a social club, I think those professional organizations are such a great way to meet like-minded people, especially it's broken out by maybe your school, by a certain industry. Maybe there is,
Mhm.
the Trojan marketing group, of course, is aspiring marketers who want to work in certain industries. And all of those people, ironically or not ironically, end up working in marketing. And especially if you look at the alumni of some of the larger organizations, you can network not only with fellow Trojans, let's say, but Trojans who work in marketing and who are part of this organization. So I would say networking, first start with your own alumni network. It's a great place to start, but then go a little bit deeper, not just a fellow Trojan, but a fellow Trojan or whatever your school mascot is,
Mhm.
and start with those organizations. That's the best place to start, the most organic. And honestly, some of my best friends were some of those organizations.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree that involvement is maybe going to have an even bigger impact than your GPA with getting a job. And that's a big myth a lot of my international student audience really struggles with because in a lot of Asian countries, the GPA is everything. The number is everything. If you get the number, you get the job. But America is not like that. The GPA is one of many, many factors that goes into getting a job. And so, yeah, clubs, organizations, professional groups, are great ways to, yeah, like you said, start building that network.
And
Definitely.
one other thing as well, Rob, that I want to say is, again, I'm not saying that you should not focus on your GPA. And industries, excuse me, that are very focused on the GPA. For instance,
Hmm.
consulting, investment banking, some of the companies that are very, very, very tough to get into. It is important, but think of the GPA as just an entry point into an interview. But once you have that interview, they're focused less on your GPA and more on your story. And your story is
Mm.
built not in the classroom, but it's really built on campus in those organizations. So I would challenge everybody here to ask yourself, if Rob and I asked you, what are you involved in? And you just said, oh, I'm a student at this school. I would say, great. The next 19,999 students are also students at that school. What else can you add to that story? And I remember literally to this day when I transferred to USC, I got involved in, I think, 10 or 20 organizations. And then I realized that A, that doesn't fit on a resume. B, recruiters don't care about general members, right? Because anybody can just show up, right? They care about the people who set up the event, who clean up the event, who get the guest speakers to come. So challenge yourself to not only get involved, but then out of the 10 or 20 organizations that you first start to join, especially early on in school, try to cut out the ones that you're not interested in. Really be methodical about what you are interested in and try to grow in a few rather than just be a general member in a lot.
Yeah, I love it. And for people who don't have work experience, when you're interviewing for a job and they say, tell me a time when this happened, these organizations, these clubs, this involvement gives you great situations and experience. Say, oh, hey, well, let me tell you about this time when I was doing this with this group. And so you can even really fill in the gaps when you don't have that work experience. So my friends, we're talking about where to get started in your job search, especially if you're a college student. But we're going to have strategies and expert tips. My friends, welcome to Chine Coaching as well. Chine Coaching is all about helping students be successful in their journeys, especially the job search. We've got an awesome friend, AJ, from the Final Round podcast, who's going to be sharing his experience, talking about where to get started, what to focus on in your job search. So AJ, please introduce yourself.
So as I shared a little bit earlier, I am a USC alum, also a proud transfer student from a community college who, graduated from high school, was not sure what I wanted to do, did a year at community, and then ended up transferring. So for all my transfer students out there, I'm here for you. I know what it's like, but just keep moving forward. When I was at USC, I was crazy involved. I was the president and founder of multiple organizations that, again, goes back to my original point of involvement is honestly more important than the GPA. I also interned at the Walt Disney Company on a program called the Business Leader Rotation Program Internship. I lived in Disney housing. And if you want to just drop in the comments, I could definitely respond and tell you what that experience was like, because it was an incredible and really fun experience. I'm also a contributing writer for Business Insider, where I talk about specific career advice and career stories. For instance, how I interviewed 2 Snapchat recruiters in the Final Round podcast. I'm also the host and founder of the Final Round, where I interview recruiters to share insight to get past the Final Round interview. And I'm also an instructor for LinkedIn Learning. I have a professional course on professional networking. So if you need any tips on networking, again, drop it in the comments and I'll be sure to respond. And the last thing, my full-time job is I'm actually a strategy consultant for Accenture. So I know all about the consultant recruitment process and how hard it is to break in and what to do to get promoted and really grow in your career.
Definitely. AJ, super excited to be hanging out with you again, having you share your knowledge. And we'll have links as well. I'm a big fan of your podcast. And I know it's going to help our audience as well. So be sure to check out the Final Round. But our next tip for student job seekers is when all these places online to find jobs, why should people really think about the job portal that their college provides?
So I remember when I was at USC that our job portal was through Handshake. I know Handshake is probably one of the largest companies or organizations that partners with these schools. And the reason why, if you are a student that has these school-specific job boards or portals, is that you are already put into a pool with your fellow classmates from that school. So instead of applying on the careers page, and again, I'm not saying that you'll never apply on the careers page of a company, because sometimes companies don't have partnerships with Handshake or whatever the company may be with these schools. But if you go to, let's say, University of Penn, and you have Handshake there and you apply to Google, let's say, Google knows exactly what pool they're taking these applicants from. So start with that before just being a general applicant. And then with this, it's also very specific. They know the recruitment timelines, especially if these companies do on-campus recruiting, they know what timelines are accurate for that specific school. Because what I learned is that, I went to school on the West Coast, and I learned that some friends on the East Coast have very different timelines, even in the Midwest or wherever it may be, even internationally, right? I know a huge portion of your audience is international students, maybe studying internationally. So just really focus on that job board for your specific school.
Yeah, I know Handshake is one of the most popular ones. There's definitely other things out there as well, but just ask at the career services at your university and they can easily guide you guys there. My friends, if you are learning a lot, loving this video and gaining value, give a big like and thumbs up to say thanks to AJ for hanging out, sharing his experience. And our chai question for you guys is, what other questions do you have for your job search? Let us know in the comments. We want to dialogue with you. We want to learn what other questions you have, maybe other videos we can make to help you. So again, tell us in the comments, what other job search questions do you have? And the next key that AJ, I think you want to share is Alumni Network. Why is that important and how can they maximize it?
So I think every person who gets into a school, you will hear that the alumni network is strong. And I learned that it doesn't just come to you. You have to go and build it, but it's there if you want to access it. So I think a really good analogy is when you join a school and you get admitted to a school, you get the key to unlock this treasure chest. That treasure chest has this alumni network, but it's not just going to open without you going out of your way, finding the right keyhole and unlocking that alumni network. So before you go out and just network, because I know we say network early when you don't need anything, part of that, tip number one, don't just go out and network with anybody, because I always say that there's no bad person to network with, but there are definitely better people to network with. And I think those better people are the people that you instantly relate to. And I think relatability is where you're from, right? I know, Rob, you're in Texas. I'm in Texas right now as well. We can talk about Texas, right? We also are both in the career space. We can talk about our companies in the career space, right? We didn't go to the same school, so we can't talk about that. But if we did have that similarity, it's very easy to talk about where we used to hang out on campus and what top organizations are on campus and what classroom you studied and whatever it may be. So starting there is a great point, especially for alumni that are proud of their school. And a lot of alumni are. I mean, I love getting outreach from people who are transfer students or who went to USC, right? Maybe the Bruins out there from UCLA, not so much. I'll try to do my best to help those Bruins, but you could even use that as a good entry point in outreach, right? So, hey, I don't go to USC. I'm on, the other side of the hill, and I'm part of competition on the Bruins side, but X, Y, and Z. So tailoring it is much easier when you have that alumni network to start with.
And why is research so important? And I feel like sometimes students don't do enough in their job search.
Research is such a good way to stand apart from the competition. And out of all of the recruiters that I've interviewed on the Final Round podcast, I would honestly say every single one agrees that it's the little things that make a recruiter or hiring manager choose candidate A over candidate B. And some of those little things get you past the front round interview, like doing the research. And the research is not just on the company, right? Of course, you should know everything there is to know about a company, but also the industry that you're playing in, right? Who are the company's competitors? And then lastly, we have this beautiful tool called LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is not only for your personal brand and job search, but it is such a good way to pretend that you are an FBI investigator and to do all of the due diligence on your interviewers, especially. And I'm not going to say every interview you'll have the names prior, but most of the times they'll say you'll be interviewing with, Joe Smith and Michael Scott, let's say, right? And you can look them up, filter by company, find those people and find where they used to work, what their current role is, where they went to school, what their location is, how old are they approximately, what are their interests. Sometimes people put their interests and hobbies, and maybe Rob, you're someone who loves to cycle and the person you're interviewing is a cycler and he or she just completed a triathlon, let's say. And imagine you didn't bring that up in the interview, right? So I call it finding these cookies, and you can use these in the interview to build those point of similarities and relatability. And the research goes such a long way, especially if, let's say that you have an interview and you're wondering why the whole interview team is not in the best mood. If you didn't know that they're a public company and that their stock price went down 50% yesterday, of course they're not going to be upbeat, but you should bring that up and talk about that and where the industry is going. So, research the company, the industry, and the interviewers. And I promise you, if you do more than that next candidate, you will advance past the final round interview.
Yeah, when there's so much competition and so much similar qualifications, being able to stand out, make those special connections, and talk about those things in a conversation that are going to make you memorable, those little things make a huge difference. So if someone has a diverse background, there can definitely be an advantage for being aware of diversity programs. How can that help someone in their job search?
So a ton of companies these days are actually building these diversity programs. And these diversity programs are focused on giving, equitable and inclusive opportunities to, people with diverse backgrounds. And the beauty is that I remember meeting some friends when I was at school who were literally a freshman and they got their foot in the door at these companies. And then that freshman internship for diversity students turns into a sophomore internship, which then turns into a longer junior summer internship, and then they get awarded, the job opportunity at the end of the road. Of course, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but if you are someone who comes from a diverse background, don't just apply to a normal application, right? Apply to these programs. But the biggest thing that I see, and it's some of the most frustrating things, is that someone doesn't find out about these programs till it's too late, till they're too old for these programs. And some examples of some of the most common, or the most well-known, programs are the Google Bold program, the McKinsey Sophomore Diversity Leadership Program, and the Bain & Company Bell program. So these companies literally have these programs focused on freshmen and sophomores. So if you're out there and maybe you're a freshman and you say, oh, well, I have 4 years or at least 3.5 years until I can figure out my job, apply to these programs, right? You don't even have to love the industry, but if you're interested in it, apply, because if you don't apply, you'll never know what could have happened.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to talk about your diverse background, your culture, your heritage, any challenges you faced, especially as an international student. There's incredible value you bring coming from a different culture, a different background, and companies want to have a diverse employee base because that's just going to add value with so many different perspectives. And so they don't want everyone to be the exact same. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to talk about these things, ask about these opportunities, and meet other people and trying to connect with other people in those companies with a similar background as yours.
And especially going back to one of my original points of just networking, especially with that alumni network, if you're an international student, it's actually not that hard to figure out who's international within these companies. I think the best way to do it is to look at their education and see if they went to either a college, or sometimes see what their high school or even middle school or elementary school, and see if the name is something that you don't recognize. Look it up on Google, and if it's from a different country, they're most likely an international student, and they had to go through that process of getting visa sponsorship and going through how to talk to those companies. So instead of trying to figure it out on your own and put all that weight on your shoulders, either A, watch Chai Coaching or Rob's YouTube channel, or B, talk to these people and ask them how they broke in. And again, if you're someone reaching out, you're an international student, and this person is a full-time employee who's also international, they're going to love chatting with you, because I guarantee you when people reach out, they don't even realize that specific point of their story.
Definitely. And one other resource I want to make sure you guys know about is the Final Round podcast. I'm a huge fan. AJ has interviewed top-notch recruiters and other career experts. I've listened to tons of the episodes, and I'm always taking notes on my phone as I'm listening because it's just so good. We'll have links for that. And AJ, thanks again, buddy. Really enjoyed this. We're going to be making a separate video with AJ as well about recruiters and what recruiters are really looking for. So be sure to check that other video out as well. It's going to really help you get into the mindset of recruiters to make sure you're preparing the right way. So AJ, really appreciate you.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you so much.
My friends, be sure to connect with us online on social media, LinkedIn, as AJ talked about, Instagram. Make sure you're subscribed to our e-newsletters as well. AJ's got a great newsletter on LinkedIn. What's the name of your newsletter on LinkedIn again?
It is Knockout Newsletter, and you can
The
find it
Knockout
at
Newsletter.
knockoutnewsletter.com.
Yes, great job search tips there as well. And thanks so much for being part of the Chai Coaching community. We'll see you next time. Cheers.